About 13.75 billion years ago, our universe as we know it today was created. Shortly thereafter, the primordial light began to shoot through the cosmos and spread throughout the entire early universe. At this time, the universe itself also expanded. However, the inflation of the universe slowed down after the first initial eruption. But since then, the rate of expansion has been steadily increasing due to the influence of increasing dark energy. In essence, the cosmos has been growing at an ever-increasing rate since its creation. Physicists and mathematicians have been studying the nature of the universe for hundreds of years, trying to solve the mysteries it contains. But there are some scientists who go one step further into the unknown by thinking about what lies beyond the boundaries of our universe. Is it possible that there is something else beyond the existence of our own universe? Other universes, worlds whose existences we can only guess at. That could well be the case. Hubble volume. The notion of outside the universe is very tricky, because first the universe has to be defined more precisely. A common formulation, which does more justice to the core of the matter, is the term the observable universe, whereby the speed of light plays a major role here. Since we can only see things when the light that they emit or reflect reaches us, we can never see further than the greatest distance that light can travel in the time that the universe has existed. Cosmologists estimate that the oldest photons we can observe have traveled a distance of 45 to 47 billion light years since the Big Bang. This means that the observable universe is about 93 billion light years large, plus or minus a few light years. These approximately 93 billion light years contain all the quarks, quasars, stars, planets, nebulae, black holes ever recorded by a telescope, and everything else that we might be able to observe but have not yet seen. But the observable universe contains only the light that has had time to reach us. This also means that the observable universe is getting bigger and bigger. However, the universe is also finite. The limited amount is also called the Hubble volume, after the telescope that has given us the most distant views of the universe so far. We will never be able to see beyond this limit, so it's basically the only universe with which we can ever interact. However, we know with a probability bordering on certainty that there is more universe beyond that limit. Astronomers believe that space, invisible to us, could also be infinite, with matter, energy, galaxies, etc., distributed pretty much exactly as in the observable universe. Beyond the Hubble volume, we will not only find more planets, but also other planets very similar to our Earth. If we go far enough, we will find another solar system with an Earth that is identical in every respect, where you had cereal for breakfast this morning instead of eggs, and another world where you skipped breakfast, and yet another world in which you got up in the morning and then robbed a bank. In fact, cosmologists believe that if you go far enough beyond the boundaries of the universe, you will find another Hubble volume that is completely identical to ours. And in those other Hubble volumes, there is another version of you out there that reflects every possible action you might take. This may seem unlikely, but then again, the infinity of the universe is very hard to imagine, because it's simply beyond human imagination. To break this down, according to the theory of relativity, objects that are close together cannot move against each other faster than the speed of light. However, there is no such law for objects that are extremely far apart when the space between them expands. In short, it's not that objects move faster than the speed of light, but that the space between the objects expands, causing them to fly away from each other at amazing speeds. Ultimately, this means that we could only reach the edge of the observable universe if we developed a transport method that would allow us to either 1. Travel faster than the speed of light, a theory that most physicists believe to be impossible, or 2. Transcend space-time by wormholes or warp propulsion, which most physicists also believe to be impossible. Dark flow. In 2008, astronomers discovered something very strange that they had not expected. galactic clusters were streaming in the same direction at immense speeds, over 2 million miles per hour. New observations in 2010 confirmed this phenomenon known as dark flow. Scientists discovered the phenomenon by studying some of the largest structures in the cosmos. Giant galaxy clusters. These clusters are collections of about 1,000 galaxies and very hot gas that emits X-rays. By observing the interaction of X-rays with cosmic microwave radiation, or CMB, left over from the Big Bang, scientists can study the motion of clusters of galaxies. The X-rays scatter photons into the CMB and shift the temperature in an effect known as the Sunyaev-Zeldovich kinetic effect. This effect had not been previously observed as a consequence of clusters of galaxies, but was first noticed by a research team led by Alexander Kashlinsky, an astrophysicist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, when it examined about 700 clusters that were up to 6 billion light-years away, halfway across the universe. They compared these clusters with the map of the CMB taken by NASA's Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, WMAP, satellite. The motion of the clusters defies all predictions about the distribution of mass in the universe after the Big Bang. One possible cause: massive structures outside the Hubble volume that exert a gravitational influence. Scientists are almost certain that the source of the suction lies outside our known universe. This would mean that the structure of the infinite universe is not uniform beyond our point of view. As for the structures themselves, they could literally be anything, from accumulations of matter and energy on almost unimaginable scales to bizarre fault lines that conduct gravitational forces from other universes. Infinity bubbles. Talking about things outside the Hubble volume may be misleading because it is still the same universe, only part of it we cannot see. The same physical laws and constants apply. In another version of the story, the expansion of the universe after the Big Bang led to the formation of bubbles in the structure of space. Each bubble stopped expanding together with the rest of space and formed its own universe with its own laws and physical constants. In this scenario, space is infinite, and each bubble for itself is also infinite, because a single infinity can contain an infinite number of infinities. Even if you could somehow break through the boundary of one bubble, the space between the bubbles would still expand, so you would never reach the next bubble, no matter how fast you move. Black holes. A theory proposed by physicist Lee Smolin, known as the theory of fertile universes, states that every black hole in our universe causes the creation of a new universe. Each universe will have slightly different physical laws than the previous one. In this way, Smolin suggests a kind of natural selection for universes. Since laws and physical conditions that lead to the frequent formation of black holes are also the reason for the formation of other universes, while universes that do not form black holes become extinct. The theory has since been disproved by Smolin himself and others. Infinitely many parallel universes. There are innumerable theories about parallel universes, but the most valid theory today involves a further development of the ideas of the string theory. This involves so-called membranes that oscillate in other directions. It would go beyond the scope of this video to go into too much detail about string or membrane theory, but the core of the theory is that the rippling membranes beyond the worlds in the 11th dimension are completely different universes, and when the ripples collide, a new universe is formed. The effects of the wave motion help to explain the observed distribution of matter in our universe. One of the strangest elements of the theory is the notion that all the gravity we experience in our universe actually enters this universe from another universe in another dimension, which explains why gravity here appears so weak compared to the other fundamental forces. The InSight Mars lander touched the surface of Mars for the first time on November 26, 2018. In the course of the nearly 4-year mission, NASA finally discovered what scientists had been looking for on Mars for so long. But what is it that researchers have wanted to know about Mars for so long? And what will this discovery change now? Are you curious? Then follow us now on this journey to the last secrets of the Red Planet. InSight's launch to a mission of the century. Mars probes and rovers have been many in the history of planetary exploration to date, but InSight was different. The unusual lander was designed and equipped like no probe before it. Scientists involved in the project eagerly watched the launch of the Atlas V rocket that would carry InSight into space. On May 5, 2018, the time had come, and the spacecraft lifted off from the Vandenberg Air Force Base and set out on its journey. At NASA, the launch of the mission was viewed with mixed emotions. At that point, more than half of the planned Mars missions had failed. Either they had never launched, or they had failed when they arrived on Mars. Millions were lost as a result, and no one knew what InSight's fate would be. InSight also began with a problem. A previous launch attempt was delayed for several months due to a vacuum leak in the SEIS instrument. But all went well. In Earth orbit, InSight slowly detached from the rocket stages and then floated freely in space. The lander was in space for 6.5 months. The technical device covered 484 million kilometers until it entered the thin atmosphere of Mars, 125 kilometers above the surface on November 26, 2018. The probe, which weighed just 700 kilograms, hurtled through the atmosphere at almost 20,000 kilometers per hour, having to withstand temperatures of around 1,500 degrees Celsius. To ensure that the fine measuring instruments on board the probe and all the other expensive gimmicks could withstand this extreme stress, InSight was securely packed in a kind of protective cover. The probe covered the last few meters hanging from a parachute, and its own small rocket engines provided the necessary counter-thrust to let the probe land safely and softly on the Martian soil. As soon as it arrived, InSight began deploying its solar panels and taking initial measurements. Thus began some 4 years of exciting Mars exploration. Past Mars missions. InSight was the first high-power seismic measurement station on Mars. NASA had previously sent 2 other main missions to Mars equipped with seismometers. However, the technology of Viking 1 and Viking 2, which were launched in the 1970s, cannot be compared to the technical capabilities of InSight. Moreover, the Viking missions were quite a bust. The seismometer of Viking 1 did not work properly during the landing and could not be used at all. Viking 2 was able to take measurements, but the instruments were so poorly calibrated after landing that it has always remained unclear whether the probe's measurements were due to seismic activity or wind. InSight's mission and challenges. InSight was intended to make up for this failure of the Viking missions after many years. The probe's main objective was clearly to survey and explore the interior of Mars. For this purpose, the lander, which was about 1 meter high and 6 meters long, was equipped with a seismometer, a windscreen, and a highly mobile robotic arm. The necessary power was provided by the 2 solar panels that gave this probe its distinctive appearance. In addition to the seismic instruments, InSight had a complete small weather station on board and a robotic arm called the Mole, which the probe would use to dig deep into the Martian soil to take temperature measurements in the upper layers of rock. First data fascinated. Even during the landing approach, and with the solar panels still folded in, InSight began collecting data. At NASA, scientists and technicians alike were beside themselves. The lander picked up vibrations from Martian winds and, for the first time, filmed clouds of water ice passing directly overhead. Tapes of the sound of Mars have been thrilling millions of people on the web since the mission launch. The secret of seismic activity. Seismic signals are any vibrations or intrinsic sounds that a planet experiences or produces. Like Earth, Mars is not silent inside. Or at least we know that now, and thanks to InSight. Before, it was not so clear to scientists just how alive and active Mars still is inside. Today, The planet appears to be a desolate, rocky world with stunning rock formations, sweeping mountains and deep canyons, but traces of life or vegetation are completely absent, as is evidence of liquid water. There are several references to dried-up lakes and even entire oceans and river courses. But where has all the water gone if Mars was once a mild water world? In addition to monitoring seismic activity such as Mars quakes, InSight was designed to scan the interior of Mars. Over the months, a perfect map of the Martian interior emerged thanks to the recording of internal waves. On these interior maps, researchers hoped there should also be evidence of underground lakes or water deposits. But first, the scientists' main interest was the activity of the Martian quakes. InSight has recorded about 450 seismic tremors. These Mars quakes are usually very fine and uniform. The strongest of them have magnitudes of 4.0 to 5.0, although the vast majority of quakes stayed well below that. The sound of Mars's interior was surprising, as researchers detected tremors with a repetition frequency similar to the human heartbeat. It almost seemed as if Mars was more alive inside than scientists had previously thought. Each of these tremors also tells a unique story about Mars's geological activity and its ongoing evolution. As the fine waves travel through the Martian subsurface, they encounter different layers of rock, cavities, and strata within. Each of these layers interacts with the quake waves through its own vibrational patterns. Based on the changes that the frequency patterns undergo as they travel through the planet, researchers can find out details about the planet's internal composition and makeup. Lucky meteorite impact. The questions scientists have long sought answers to were whether Mars still has an active core in its interior, and why it evolved to become dust-dry and desolate today. By a lucky coincidence, both of these questions were answered. On the other side of Mars, a meteorite had hit and had caused vibrations, which went at once across the planet. These waves measured Mars virtually once in its entire cross-section, and thus finally provided scientists with the answer to the question of the core. Researchers were able to perceive for the first time that Mars does indeed have an active core. The surprise was that this core, which is about 1,830 kilometers wide, must be liquid throughout. Our Earth has a core of nearly solid iron, surrounded by liquid materials and a crust, creating an optimal, stable magnetic field that protects us from influences from the cosmos. Mars's weak magnetic field was almost certainly responsible for leaving the planet almost defenseless against the bombardment of solar particles and cosmic rays. The magnetic field specifically protects us from radiation from the sun. The magnetic field lines catch the myriads of particles that hit our planet daily from the sun and guide them along their course lines into a kind of protective bag. On Mars, this protection may never have been as well developed as it is here. Solar winds and radiation from space hit our neighboring planet much harder. The atmosphere probably became thinner and thinner, water escaped into space, retreated underground, or froze. If Mars really once was a world similar to Earth, it became desolate because of the lack of protection. In the course of the InSight mission, evidence actually also grew that Mars really was once a world with water, a mild climate, and perhaps plants or simple living things. Deep beneath the dusty surface of Mars, the Mars lander found evidence to support these theories. Measurements there showed another magnetic field 10 times stronger than scientists had previously thought. This ancient magnetic field, trapped in the rocks of Mars, provided evidence of a time when Mars had a denser atmosphere and possibly liquid water on its surface. The Song of Mars. While InSight was unraveling the seismic mysteries of Mars, the spacecraft encountered another unexpected sound inside. The mysterious hum that sounded almost like a ditty. After the heartbeats of Mars and the gentle whistling of the wind, it was now almost as if Mars was casually humming away. Astrogeologists describe this humming like a melody of Mars waiting to be understood by us. Compared to the barren and rocky surface, which has so far held few surprises except for endless landscapes and lots of rock, the sounds of the planet are a veritable treasure chest of new discoveries. No plates, but a crust. During its 4-year observing period, InSight's seismic experiment for interior structure surveyed nearly the entire interior of Mars. Like X-rays, the seismic waves ran through the planet and revealed, among other things, that Mars has no continental plates like Earth. Rather, the surface appears to resemble a single solid crust. Planetary scientists had long suspected this, and thanks to InSight, confirmation finally came. The crust turned out to be much thinner than expected, but regionally, it has 2 or even 3 sublayers. The thickness of the simple crust is usually around 20 kilometers. Where there are 2 or 3 sublayers, it is up to 37 kilometers thick. In addition to all these discoveries, InSight has studied Mars's volatile atmosphere, recorded hurricanes and real tornadoes, and collected thousands of data on wind speed and direction. Thanks to this information, scientists now have a comprehensive picture of the weather and climate on Mars. This data will, of course, be of paramount importance in preparing manned missions to Mars. Dwellings for humans, who will one day study Mars on the ground, must be optimally adapted to the weather conditions. No human being can survive on the planet for long outside a protected shelter. The harsh Martian climate was also felt by InSight. After surviving numerous sandstorms, so many deposits had formed that the solar panels were increasingly failing. After 4 successful mission years, the end came for InSight. The power supply was simply no longer sufficient. In December 2022, NASA announced the official end of the mission. NASA is the largest and most powerful space organization in the world. Time and time again, rumors abound that NASA has information about space and aliens that it does not want to share with the ordinary people of the world. Time and time again, whistleblowers have leaked suppressed images or made public statements about what is really going on at NASA. We have to ask ourselves, why are certain photos being hidden from the public? What explosive information do these photos contain? Stay tuned as we investigate these mysteries and uncover banned NASA files. From backyard to world organization. In 1958, NASA was founded as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in a backyard office. The goal of the then insignificant organization was to oversee the U.S.'s just emerging space projects. A short time later, NASA became an official government agency. If the importance of space travel increases in the future, and if humans even colonize space, NASA's power will continue to grow. This all sounds fine and dandy so far, if it weren't for the rumors that NASA, as well as the US government, the Pentagon, and the CIA, are not entirely kosher. The rumors say that NASA was also founded from the beginning to pursue a cover-up policy against the quite normal population. In the late 1940s, a missile had crashed over Roswell in the US, described by eyewitnesses as a large, silver-colored flying disc, and quite a few eyewitnesses even claim to have seen 2 lifeless bodies of non-human entities being recovered at the site. During these times, sightings of aliens and UFOs increased. The government, as well as later the still young NASA, always claimed that these reports were hysteria or optical illusions, until secret informants appeared on the scene, claiming exactly the opposite. One prominent example is Donna Hare, a former NASA employee who allegedly retouched thousands of photos on behalf of the space agency. But let's get our own impression of what's really going on at NASA. Is NASA hiding something on Mars? We owe a lot to NASA, that much is clear. Without the US space program, we probably wouldn't know as much about the universe. We never would have seen fascinating images of cosmic nebulae, black holes, and quasars. But could it be that the agency has more information than it shares with the public? Maybe. We certainly can't judge images and impressions we may never have seen. We don't know what all NASA is keeping under wraps. These images, which have certainly become public, are among the points of contention between NASA's critics and the space agency's official spokespeople. Many of the images are from Mars. In part, this is simply because Mars is now the most studied and photographed celestial body outside of Earth. Humans are expected to land there with spaceships within the next decade and establish the first research stations and settlements on site. But is this really justifiable in view of these photos? In 2015, space enthusiasts discovered this circular formation on officially released images of the Martian surface. Which, well, did you guess? That's right. This formation reminds us somehow a little bit of the terrestrial Stonehenge, and accordingly, the almost circular arrangement of rocks got the name Marshenge. Besides the arrangement of the stones, the almost hexagonal appearing foundation of the monument is also surprising. On Earth, Stonehenge has been identified by scientists as a prehistoric stellar observatory. But what could this formation have served for? And above all, who built it there? It's all just coincidence, says NASA. These stones were formed there only by wind, weather, and erosion. But can we really be so sure? It's exactly this security with which NASA scientists repel each reference to the working of higher life forms outside of the Earth. Besides, NASA searches officially for exactly such traces. People are confused about this behavior of the space agency, and more doubts arise whether NASA does not play a gigantic confusion game around aliens on Mars or elsewhere. Until today, nobody knows who had the forces and also the mental ability thousands of years ago to establish structures like Stonehenge on Earth. So how will any Earthling know for sure who might have once lived on Mars, and if this formation is really just due to chance and erosion? Mars Pyramids. Since the 1970s, NASA is said to have kept photos of Martian pyramids under wraps until they too leaked out. The number of pyramid-shaped structures on Mars is almost frightening. Not only, the pyramids photographed in the 1970s are astonishingly reminiscent of the phenomenal structures on Earth. NASA's Curiosity rover has also captured brand new images of pyramids. The Curiosity rover is a car-sized one that has been traveling in the Gale crater on the surface of Mars for more than 10 years to study rock formations. Actually, the main goal of this space robot is to study the climate on Mars and its geology. The Gale crater may have once been filled with water until Mars mysteriously dried up. Computer simulations have found that several million years ago, our neighboring planet was a water world with a mild climate and possibly life. So how do we, or better, NASA for sure, know that there was not also a higher civilization there, whose former structures are now buried under thick layers of Martian dust? Allegedly, the habitable period had not been sufficient in order to let develop life, according to terrestrial yardsticks. But exactly here the mistake could lie. Very probably we cannot compare the evolution on other planets with the development of life on Earth. Everything only optical illusions? When it comes to clearing up alien rumors on Mars, opponents of such theories like to bring up the example of the Martian face into play. This formation, discovered in the 1970s, resembles a human face. For decades, the image was the focus of speculation surrounding Martian humans. Then, the image was demystified in the present. The impression of a face was caused only by the play of light incidence and shadow, as well as a mental effect known as pareidolia. Pareidolia occurs when the brain suddenly sees things that resemble human structures in barren environments such as rock and boulder deserts. Then, impressions of faces and buildings suddenly appear in the rocks, and the Mars pyramids are also thought to be such illusions or miscalculations by the brain. The underground theory. As Mars geologists found more and more evidence that water on Mars might have retreated underground, some UFO enthusiasts and science fiction lovers developed the theory that creatures still living on Mars today might have retreated underground as well. To be sure, even renowned researchers admit that the Martian subsurface could be a possible habitable environment for settlers in the future. However, this is far from speculations that there are already underground settlements of an unknown civilization on Mars. Further evidence for the underground theory is said to be this photo. This rectangular door was discovered by the Mars rover Curiosity in a rock formation. The resemblance to a gateway or portal into underground rock worlds or cities as we know them from Earth is really convincing. At this site, who can't imagine a Martian quickly disappearing underground to avoid prying eyes? If we take a look at the dimensions of the door, however, a slight doubt arises, even among the most die-hard alien friends. Because with only a little more than 30 centimeters in height, this gate is not much bigger than a XXL cat flap. If this is really a portal to an underground Martian city, Martians must be very small people. NASA keeps the secret about Apollo 11. Finally, let's move on to the photos and secrets that came from astronauts. A great mystery of space travel is the Apollo 11 mission, in whose astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in the late 1960s. Since then, there have been rumors about what really happened on the moon. Already during the landing approach, there were problems, because the contact to the two astronauts was interrupted for minutes. NASA almost thought they were lost, but then Armstrong and Aldrin reappeared. Instead of landing on a flat part of the moon, the two had to land their Eagle landing capsule on a very rugged part of the moon. This phase of the flight was not televised, nor did NASA acknowledge the faux pas after the mission. But far stranger things are said to have happened on the lunar flight. Armstrong is reported to have said verbatim, "These babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you. There are other spacecraft out there lined up on the edge of the crater watching us." Bender went public with his information after he resigned from NASA. NASA denied, and at best labels people like Bender or Donna Hare as blowhards or disgruntled ex-subcontractors who wanted to get back at NASA by going public. But for the most part, people at NASA simply remain silent. The organization can afford to do so because it's accountable to no one but the US government and other governments and space agencies involved in its projects. In the nearly 50 years since the moon landing, again and again, sensational statements of Armstrong and Aldrin in private circles about sightings of extraterrestrials and speech prohibition imposed on the part of NASA have apparently been expressed. Therefore, the report about a bizarre finding after Armstrong's death in 2012 caused a sensation. The most famous astronaut of all time had apparently kept some suspicious objects from the Apollo mission in a casket in his closet, and not even Armstrong's wife knew about these things. As for what was leaked, it was claimed to be a photo camera and some smaller technical parts of the Eagle landing capsule. A fierce wave of speculation has again broken out about whether there was still film in the camera and what these photos might have shown. What did Ivan Wagner photograph? Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner was on the International Space Station, ISS, in 2020. While there, he filmed a series of 5 lights, which he spontaneously referred to as visitors. Unofficially, information is being traded that unknown flying objects are constantly appearing around the ISS. And once again, astronauts are said to have taken a vow of silence about these things before they are even approved for the programs. The term visitor is supposedly as normal for astronauts on the ISS as it is for us on Earth. Except in this case, the visitors are not people or a neighbor's cat. Wagner posted the photo on social media, commenting that he had reported his discovery to the Russian Space Agency. They classified the incident as interesting, but that was it. What do the recently declassified photos of Venus that the Soviet Union hid in the 1970s reveal? Why are these photos causing an uproar among scientists? Long considered a former water world, how did it transform into an inferno of toxic gases and extreme heat? Venus, often called Earth's evil sister, holds secrets that could revolutionize our understanding of her. Join us now as we explore these questions and discover why the fate of Venus concerns us all. A hellish furnace. Popular U.S. astronomer and planetary scientist Michio Kaku said in an interview that Mars and Venus are strange planets of contradiction. Actually, both could still be in the sun's habitable zone if they had atmospheres and strong magnetic fields. It's possible that that was once the case, but something has caused these planets to change in such a way that they are now inhospitable places. It remains our Earth as the only lonely, habitable, and life-friendly planet. But Earth is also changing, and we need to find out more about that change. Venus lies farther from the sun than Mercury and is much hotter than the little planet. Temperatures approaching 400 degrees Celsius would melt even lead on Venus. Nevertheless, people have managed to place probes on this inhospitable world. The Soviet Union succeeded more than 40 years ago. So far, it's the only nation to have more accurate information about the surface of Venus, and important photographs may have been misappropriated. World-renowned physicist Michio Kaku now recalls these missions. The scientist cited the Soviet Union's remarkable photos of Venus as groundbreaking and important sources of information, even if they were taken some 40 years ago. More recently, Kaku gave a riveting presentation on our neighboring planet at a conference of astronomers and futurologists, sparking new enthusiasm for Venus thanks in no small part to the photographs released by the Soviet Union. Among other things, Kaku showed how to explain the volcanic activity on Venus, its lava flows and craters. The presentation offered impressive insights into the planet's past and illuminated its turbulent geologic history. In addition, Kaku showed evidence of signs of water erosion in the form of strikingly polished rocks and channels cut into the ground. This finding prompted researchers to speculate again about the planet's original temperature and the possibility of water on the surface. The race for Mars and Venus. Mars may one day be colonized by humans. If models of terraforming prove viable, perhaps the red planet could be transformed back into a world with an atmosphere. This is not the case with Venus. The planet is much too hot and too toxic. One may wonder why the Soviet Union invested vast sums to visit the planet and did not fly to Mars. Experts like Michio Kaku suggest that it was because of the competitive situation between the US and the Soviet Union at the time. The Soviets' plans to explore Venus with probes emerged around the time the US announced it would send the first humans to the moon and then send humans to Mars. Before that, the Soviet Union had successfully put the first man into space. And at that time, Soviet spacecraft were also ahead of those of the United States. NASA stepped on the gas and pushed ahead with the Apollo missions. Fortunately, the Soviets turned their attention to Venus, and the tense Cold War rivalry between the two did not carry over to the moon. The Soviet Union sought its own target with which to shine, and that was Venus, knowing full well that it would never be possible to send humans there. The probes that the Soviets built from the 1960s to the 1980s are now legend, as are the photos of Venus. The successes made the Soviet Union the first nation to put a probe on a planet. Before that, only orbiters had been in use. The fact that it succeeded on an inhospitable planet like Venus gave the Soviet Union the prestige it was looking for at the time. The Venera missions. The Soviet Union made history with its first successful landing of a spacecraft on Venus in 1970. Before Venera 7, several missions missed Venus. Others landed, but the technology failed, so no data was sent. Regarding these failures, it must be honestly said today that it's almost a miracle that the 7th probe landed successfully and sent data at all. For Venus, despite its similarity to Earth in size and mass, is an incredibly hostile environment. The challenges begin with Venus's intense atmospheric pressure, which is about 92 times that of Earth. This is roughly equivalent to the pressure of nearly a kilometer deep below the surface of an earthly ocean. A human being would have had his lungs crushed here long ago. Then, there is the extreme heat and toxic gases on Venus. Venus's atmosphere consists mainly of carbon dioxide, along with traces of sulfuric acid and other gases. The pervasive greenhouse effect on Venus leads to heat retention, making it the hottest planet in our solar system. Its average surface temperature reaches a scorching 460 degrees Celsius. Venus's strong magnetic field, which protects the planet from the constant onslaught of the solar wind, can also disrupt or cause technical equipment to function differently than on Earth. In fact, to this day, Venus remains a formidable challenge to all who seek to explore it. Its unforgiving environment and extreme conditions make it the most difficult target for landings in the entire solar system. Nevertheless, even after the initial failures, the Soviet Union continued its efforts and succeeded. The allure of conquering Venus's nastiness through technological know-how was the perfect target to prove the Soviet Union's superiority in space travel. The Venera 1 to 14 probes. Venera 1 was an extraordinary and very large probe, weighing in at around 700 kilograms. Like its successors, this probe had a carefully insulated interior. The purpose of the thick envelopes and layers was to ensure optical functioning of the instruments and to maintain a stable temperature inside them. The first Venera 1 probe is still considered a true testament to the ingenuity of our scientific endeavor. It would have been nice if this masterpiece of engineering had met with immediate success. But Venera 1 fell victim to the daring mission and flew past Venus. But the Soviet Union did not give up because of this. Already on February 12, 1961, the second attempt was launched. Unfortunately, this mission encountered an obstacle on its way to Venus. Despite its valiant efforts, it too failed to reach its intended destination. However, it came within almost 100,000 kilometers of the fascinating planet. Venera 2 was already somewhat adapted. Outwardly, it resembled its predecessors, but the probe was lighter and provided better navigation capabilities. On February 27, 1966, this probe completed its flyby and came within 25,000 kilometers of its target. But then fate struck again, and Venera 2 succumbed to the challenge of overheating. The spacecraft's signals fell silent just short of the target, and again the Soviet Union did not give up. Venera 3 was the first successful landing on our sister planet, although not very successful, crashing on its surface. Venera 4 sent over 90 minutes of data collection as it descended through Venus's thick atmosphere on October 18, 1967. It found that there was no global magnetic field and that carbon dioxide levels in the air were quite high, as might be expected. Soon, it melted under the oppressive conditions of the planet's surface. In January 1969, Venera 5 and Venera 6 launched 5 days apart. With identical designs, they were able to make precise measurements of ambient temperature, pressure, and composition as they penetrated Venus's atmosphere. The spacecraft looked like Venera 4, but were much more robustly built. Finally, Venera 7's descent module was much more advanced and was designed to provide a soft landing on Venus. The flight, which launched on August 17, 1970, was largely successful. The probe safely touched the surface on December 15, 1970, after about 30 minutes of freefall. Only, for some reason, the probe then flipped over. Although it was initially assumed that Venera 7 had failed, it surprisingly did provide usable data. The lander determined that the surface was over 482 degrees hot, roughly equivalent to a pizza oven. Unfortunately, the pressure sensor failed during the descent. Nevertheless, scientists were able to use the data provided to estimate that the surface pressure in the region was about 92 bars. Venera 8 landed on Venus on July 22, 1972, just as Venera 7 did, except this time the spacecraft did not flip over. Venera 8 measured the ambient light levels on the surface in order to adapt future camera systems to the environment. Venera 9 through Venera 12 were then even more finely engineered and had cameras on board. The weight of the probes increased again to about 650 kilograms. Between 1975 and 78, these models landed, but the cameras failed during the first landings. This was not so much because of Venus itself, but because the lens covers would not open. However, some managed to transmit some fragmentary first images of the surface of Venus. There is something eerie about the first images taken by Venera 9 and 10. Sharp, detailed, and somewhat distorted in all directions, thanks to the wide-angle lenses that they used, they show a rocky, alien terrain stretching far into the distance. In addition to showing the surface, parts of the probes are also visible in the images. The first perfect panoramic images were finally provided by Venera 13 and 14. Launched in 1981, these missions went down in the history of space travel, and the measurement data as well as the images are still considered the best that we have of Venus. The photos showed a landscape devoid of vegetation, consisting mainly of rocks and soil. The dominant color of the scene is a yellowish-orange hue created by the dense atmosphere. The spacecraft also collected data on air and ground temperature, pressure, wind speed, and the chemical composition of the atmosphere and surrounding landscape. Venera 15 and 16 were orbiters, not landers, and had state-of-the-art radar-based imaging equipment that monitored and mapped the entire planet from a safe distance and from elliptical orbits. Although Pioneer 12 was the first spacecraft to use radar to produce a map of Venus, the resolution of the maps produced by Venera 15 and 16 was superior by nearly 2 kilometers per pixel. These probes sent back fantastic, detailed photos that showed large portions of the harsh environment, with impact craters, high peaks, and basins flooded with lava. Several international space agencies have sent probes to Venus since the Venera missions, including the ESA and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. The US left its mark on Venus exploration with missions such as Pioneer 12 and the enormously successful Magellan program. Nevertheless, the Soviet Venera program was and remains the most intensive and successful Venus program of all time. Despite its enormous success, the Soviet Union never released all of its photos to the international scientific community. Only a few were released to the public, intended to depict the Soviet Union's triumph over the United States. The rest of the research, as well as the majority of the photos, were considered state secrets by the Soviet Union, and we're left to wonder to this day what the Soviets really know or knew about Venus. The state has long since perished. Today, the secrets may be held by Russia, or they may have been lost in the turmoil of the revolution. Two mysterious objects have entered our solar system in quick succession, causing chaos. To date, only one of these visitors has been clearly identified. The other remains a mystery and may even be a threat that is difficult to assess. But what is so unusual about these objects? And why could one of the two strange visitors even put us into great danger? We're investigating the matter. Stay tuned and join us for a look at the most amazing discoveries of the last decade. Never-before-seen objects. We know of many objects in our solar system that are not planets or moons. These include smaller celestial bodies, such as asteroids, comets, and even meteorites. These objects all have one thing in common. They fly on relatively irregular courses through the solar system and can become thereby a danger. However, these objects originate without exception from our solar system. There are even exciting relics of the earliest hours of our solar system. When in a fast-rotating dust disk our star was born, mass potentials were formed, from which later planets were born, and some parts of matter also simply remained. These objects we know today as asteroids or comets. They are bundled in an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and in the outer edge of the solar system in the Kuiper Belt. Every now and then, an asteroid or comet shears off and then flies towards the sun. It's probable that gravitational shifts between the planets and the sun are to blame for this. These objects can become a hazard if they get on a collision course with Earth. For this reason, NASA and other space agencies are constantly monitoring the cosmos around Earth and throughout the solar system. Huge telescopes do nothing but protect us every day. They try to detect every object around the Earth, no matter how small, and determine the orbit and the origin of the object. The astronomers were actually sure they had the situation pretty well under control, but then something shocking happened. Oumuamua. On October 19th, 2017, the Pan-STARRS Space Observatory in Hawaii reported finding an asteroid that had narrowly missed Earth. The shock was great because the object had only been discovered after it had already passed Earth. If the chunk had been on a collision course, we might have been unaware of it, and the impact would have hit us as if on a dead run. With an estimated size of 1,000 meters, the supposed asteroid would have been big enough to cause widespread devastation and possibly even to trigger a global catastrophe. This shock was not yet digested properly, and the peculiarities began to go further already. The object that had passed so close to us could not be traced to an orbit that led into the Kuiper or asteroid belts. This part was also traveling much too fast for an asteroid. Calculations showed that the object had come to us from outside the solar system, making it the first interstellar object ever recorded and observed by humans to visit us. The shocks about this object did not stop there, because what was it? Where did it come from? And was there any danger from this thing? The object was given the Hawaiian name Oumuamua, which means first messenger from an alien world. Borisov. On August 30th, 2019, Gennady Borisov, a Russian engineer and amateur astronomer, was looking into the twilight of the night over Crimea. While doing so, he noticed a moving object that resembled a comet, but was moving in a very unusual way. The direction of motion was opposite to the usual trajectory of comets from the main asteroid belt. Borisov's curiosity was aroused, and a little later scientists were faced with the second sensation. Comet Borisov had also clearly come from outside the solar system. Thus, Borisov was the second object which had penetrated from outside into our solar system. However, the Borisov object made it much easier for scientists than Oumuamua. The flying lump of rock was quickly and reliably identified as a comet. Comets, unlike asteroids, are composed of organic matter and often polluted water ice. They release dust and fine ice particles into the environment, forming the comet's distinctive tails. Nevertheless, Borisov remains a source of fascination. This comet had come to us from an alien solar system, or after a long journey through the infinite reaches of the cosmos. It could be the relic of an ancient star-forming region, come from a star system millions of light years away, or be a messenger from a neighboring world. We don't know at this time, but because Borisov is made of organic materials, it could give us clues about water elsewhere in space, or it could even piggyback on bacteria or microbes from another world. Borisov's orbit is currently being monitored, and who knows, maybe in the coming years, there will be a probe that flies to the comet to study it more closely, much like Rosetta Philae, the ESA probe that landed on comet Chury-Gerasimenko in 2004. One thing is already clear at this point: Borisov poses no danger to us. However, the situation is completely different with the object that was discovered in Hawaii. The mystery of Oumuamua. The orbit calculation had quickly revealed to the scientists that the object with the name Oumuamua originates from Vega, an alien star 147 trillion miles away. Initial measurements of Oumuamua had yielded confusing data. At times, it was shaped like a cigar, and at other times, it appeared disc-shaped. At its longest diameter, the object measured about 1,000 meters. That's not very large for a comet or an asteroid, but would be enough to really cause trouble in an impact. Oumuamua could destroy a major city. In particular, the speed makes this object a mystery and a threat, as Oumuamua races through space at an incredible 95,000 kilometers per second, much faster than any known comet or asteroid. Next, the object's unusual flight behavior set astronomers on edge. When it had already passed our sun, it made a sharp turn and accelerated in a completely different direction. It almost seemed as if Oumuamua had a will of its own, or as if the object was being steered in some mysterious way. Asteroids or comets move along fixed lines that have to do with the gravitational pull of the planets, the sun, and their interactions with each other. Therefore, the orbit's velocities and collision probabilities can be predicted very well and safely by scientists. An object that is hurtling, and moreover, hooks in ways that are unpredictable, poses a danger that is difficult to assess. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb was the first to suggest that it might be an artificial structure created by an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization. Before Loeb, hardly anyone had the courage to say what everyone thought, for the rules of physics could not explain Oumuamua. In fact, an artificial origin would best explain the object's many peculiar properties. Oumuamua approached Earth once again and has been moving away from the solar system again since late October 2017, and has been heading toward the Pegasus constellation ever since. All attempts to close in on Oumuamua and unlock its mysteries have strangely failed. Surveys yielded confusing data, and attempts to figure out the object's composition also yielded data that didn't quite fit the picture. The object itself emitted no light and reflected almost no sunlight. According to this, Oumuamua would have to be made of a type of rock that absorbs light almost completely. But color scans showed that Oumuamua must be dark red to brownish. This is true only for some objects in the Kuiper Belt. But those are colored reddish by dust, and Oumuamua did not give off a speck of dust. The surface appeared rough and yet almost artificially polished. Scans had also revealed that Oumuamua's interior must be made of unknown compositions of metal. A new study suggests that it could be an alien spacecraft with a light sail. But what could extraterrestrials want with us? And that too, when they are more than 300,000 light-years flight time away from us. The Vega System. Vega is a very bright star, which is only 25 light-years away from Earth. Alternating with some other stars every few thousand years, Vega becomes our northern star, or in other words, the star which appears most northern in the firmament. For this reason, we call this star the past and future of the North Star. These shifts occur because the Earth's axis wobbles over a period of 26,000 years, so our perception of north gradually shifts to different stars. Vega was the North Star many millennia ago, and it will resume that position in about 12,000 years. In early 2013, astronomers discovered an asteroid belt surrounding Vega, suggesting the presence of exoplanets in the Vega system. Studies of the system show that there are two regions around Vega from which Oumuamua could have originated if it is a natural object. An outer region contains icy asteroids and comets, and an inner asteroid ring contains warmer space rocks. However, if the theory that Oumuamua is an object that did not form naturally is correct, we must ask, then what is it? A probe? There would be a theoretical possibility, but all attempts to contact the object failed. A probe would have to emit, according to our understanding, some kind of signal or electronic radiation, but neither was the case. We don't know whether we're possibly dealing with a technology, since we don't currently know how probes of other civilizations might function. In this case, the question would further arise whether Oumuamua could have been sent with a malicious intent. We certainly cannot rule it out completely. However, calculations have shown that Oumuamua was on its way to us for about 300,000 years. If an extraterrestrial nation had sent the probe to explicitly spy on our solar system, these species would either be very long-lived, or the endeavor would make little sense. Of course, it's also conceivable that Oumuamua was and is a probe, or other technical device similar to our Voyager probes. After its actual mission goal, the probe flew on and on. Just as Voyager 1 and 2 will reach first neighboring star systems in many thousands of years, Oumuamua has just appeared with us now. Whether or whenever aliens will catch sight of our probes, they will find a golden disk inside each of the Voyagers, which gives information about what the probes are and who sent them. Maybe Oumuamua had something like that on board, only we didn't find it because we weren't able to capture and examine the object. Oumuamua was the first visitor from an alien world, and now it slowly disappears again from the solar system. At its current position far behind Neptune, it's no longer visible to our telescopes. Will we now never know what Oumuamua really is? Or will the object possibly return? Join us now as we share the latest findings surrounding this event of the century. The mystery of Oumuamua. It doesn't happen every day. In 2017, the Pan-STARRS Space Telescope in Hawaii sighted an object that no one had ever seen before. Oumuamua was initially thought to be an asteroid that narrowly missed Earth. Then, it quickly became clear that this object had come to us from interstellar space, making it the first craft of its kind. For 11 days, the alien kept the world of science on tenterhooks. Then, Oumuamua moved away at breakneck speed, without researchers really managing to unravel its mystery. Now, Oumuamua is gone. It has passed beyond Neptune's orbit and is so far away that no telescope will ever be able to study it again. Oumuamua emits no light at all and also reflects light very poorly, making the object hard to spot at this distance. Because of its small size of just under 1,000 meters, its strange shape, and its furious speed, even our best telescopes cannot detect the stranger so far out in space. The last investigations had shown that the new orbit will carry the strangest celestial body of all time, directly in the direction of the constellation Pegasus, or Oumuamua will hit a snag and come back again. Such an unusual, and for an ordinary asteroid or comet, completely impossible maneuver, Oumuamua had already shown once, shortly after it had passed the Sun. Oumuamua first braked, then turned in a sharp angle, accelerated, and came back towards us. This strange behavior cannot be explained until today. The origin of the object and its true nature remain a scientific question around which a fierce dispute has broken out. Is Oumuamua a fragment of a celestial body, such as a planet or a moon, that was hurled towards us from a distant star system? Or is it a piece of alien technology that was sent to our solar system, either accidentally or intentionally? Scientists found plausible explanations for both theories, and we'll look at them now. Not an asteroid and not a comet? Oumuamua's unusual nature makes it impossible to classify the object unambiguously as a comet, an asteroid, or anything artificial. However, it would be important to know what this piece was. Among other things, 6 new objects that allegedly have similarities with Oumuamua should provide information. Among the most extraordinary capabilities of the unknown is undoubtedly its unusual ability to accelerate. Asteroids and comets accelerate through chemical processes or the interaction of gravitational forces in space. The acceleration rates can be explained and understood with the formulas of physics, but not so with Oumuamua. Information about the true nature of Oumuamua could be provided by a completely new category of celestial bodies called dark comets. Facts about Oumuamua. For all of you who don't know Oumuamua yet, we now share the most important facts again. Oumuamua was initially named A/2017 U1 or C/2017 U1 Pan-STARRS. The object was discovered on October 19, 2017 by the Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii. The Pan-STARRS project uses the telescope to protect Earth from asteroids. After it was clear that the object came to us from interstellar space, it was then given the name 1/Oumuamua. The 1 and / combinations stand for the first recognized interstellar object to enter our solar system, and Oumuamua means first scout from an alien world. The size between 100 and 1,000 meters fit first to an asteroid. The form, however, not so much. Sometimes it appeared as an elongated cigar, then more like a flat disc. Its trajectory and speed made it clear that this object was different from anything that had come before. Probably in truth, Oumuamua is not the first interstellar object to speed through our solar system, as there are potentially billions of possible objects that also did the same thing. It's just that we humans didn't notice these objects in the past, or we simply did not have the technology necessary to do so. Even normal asteroids are extremely difficult to spot, as they do not emit any light themselves, and depending on the material, can absorb all the light that hits them. Comets, on the other hand, are usually brightly glowing objects that can often be seen with the naked eye from Earth when they are in a near-Earth orbit. When Oumuamua was discovered, it had already sped past Earth and was about level with the Sun. Then, Oumuamua suddenly accelerated by about 17 meters per second. This seems small, but this kind of acceleration violates all known laws of physics. In any case, it was enough to cause a stir in the world of science. In physics, objects can only accelerate and change their trajectory as drastically as Oumuamua did when pushed. And so, scientists began to seek explanations for the pushing force. Some initial hypotheses that solar winds pushed the object were quickly discarded. The force exerted by solar particles is not enough to explain Oumuamua's acceleration, assuming it was some kind of rock. Even the best photos of Oumuamua showed only a tiny speck, giving little indication of what the object is really made of, or what it looks like. Most theories about its shape came from the variations in its light curve, whose brightness rose and fell uniformly as Oumuamua traveled around the Sun. The results were absolutely not in favor of a round object, but rather showed alternating evidence for an irregularly shaped object, such as a disc or a cigar. Dispute about Oumuamua. Scientists searched strenuously for comparable examples of accelerating objects in our solar system and came up with comets. As comets approach the Sun, the ice within them heats up, sublimates, turns to gas, and sputters out of the comet's main body. This ejection of gas and dust forms the comet's characteristic tail and gives the comet a small thrust, acting like a small thruster on the side closest to the Sun. Comets are thus accelerated away from the heat source. Around Oumuamua, however, no evaporation such as ice, dust, and gas could be seen. These evaporations would have also made Oumuamua more visible. The absence of this similarity to known objects led to more exotic theories. The first theory came from Harvard professor Avi Loeb. Loeb was the first to proclaim Oumuamua could represent extraterrestrial technology. He argued in 2018 that solar winds could provide the acceleration observed at Oumuamua, but only if it was actually much thinner than scientists originally assumed. By thin, Loeb suggests somewhere between 0.3 and 0.9 millimeters thin. Since a 1,000 meter long, 1 millimeter thin object is unlikely in nature, Loeb argued that it must be artificial, a light cell created to capture solar winds and use them to accelerate from one star to another. This theory met resistance from other members of the academic community. Daryl Seligman, a theorist and postdoctoral researcher at Cornell University, countered in 2020 with a study that found that perhaps no outgassing of Oumuamua was detected because it was emitting an invisible gas like hydrogen. This would not have been detectable with telescopes pointed at Oumuamua. Seligman suggested that Oumuamua was composed entirely or mostly of such hydrogen, a hydrogen iceberg that sublimated thanks to the sun's heat, and this sublimation produced the thrust. Loeb and Seligman got into an argument. A few months later, Loeb published another paper challenging the other theory and asking where exactly this hydrogen iceberg could have come from. He showed mathematically that starlight in interstellar space is warm enough to melt any hydrogen iceberg that would have formed in the nearest dense molecular clouds before it came anywhere near our solar system. Loeb was still convinced that an extraterrestrial technology explanation was most likely. Seligman revised his hydrogen iceberg theory, but maintained that Oumuamua had been moved by escaping pure hydrogen gas. Seligman eventually found support from Jennifer Bergner. In 2023, the assistant professor at the University of California found evidence in the laboratory that his hydrogen thrust theory was correct. The two wrote a paper arguing that Oumuamua was a whole new category of celestial object, a quote-unquote dark comet. Their new explanation took into account Oumuamua's acceleration and also its lack of dust, since dark comets need not emit dust. These objects create their propulsion by reconfiguring hydrogen structures inside. Avi Loeb was not convinced and wrote 2 new papers on the subject himself, accusing Seligman of bad mathematics and continuing to push his extraterrestrial spaceship model. Seligman was then already busy searching for proof of his theories and looking for clues to other dark comets. Together with Bergner and some other comrades in arms, he combed through data of objects that had already been registered in our solar system but could not be explained. 6 dark comets. In fact, the research team found 6 objects that fit the criteria. 6 objects that showed non-gravitational, non-solar wind acceleration that could not be explained by any known mechanism. These objects were small, some measured as little as 3 meters. They looked like asteroids, were near-Earth objects, and showed no special features except for the strange acceleration. Until now, these accelerations had not been noticed because the rates were very small due to the small size of the objects, and the strange behavior was not noticed at all. It wasn't until Seligman and his colleague specifically looked for these rates that the candidates stood out. These objects do not flit from planet to planet through the solar system like Oumuamua. They are also not interstellar objects, but they resemble Oumuamua and could allow conclusions about its true nature. In 2031, a Japanese probe is expected to study these strange near-Earth objects and even collect some of them and bring them to Earth to study. Perhaps then, Seligman can look forward to a late triumph, but for that long, he will be no more able to prove his theory than Loeb. With Oumuamua now far beyond our reach, we may never know. All attempts to quickly construct a probe that could still catch up with Oumuamua failed. Of course, it could end up that neither theory is correct. The longer and deeper we explore the universe, the more we encounter strange and unexpected phenomena, and the more we will learn. Maybe one day more objects like Oumuamua will appear in our solar system, and we will find a conclusive explanation for the phenomenon. From the 1960s to the 1980s, the Soviet Union landed on Venus with some technically excellent probes. No nation has studied this enigmatic planet as well as the former Soviet Union, and it can be assumed that nobody knows so well about the planet until today. Neil deGrasse Tyson, a renowned astrophysicist and science communicator, has recently worriedly pointed out that the Soviet Union may have withheld explosive information about Venus, and a study by a Russian researcher shocked with statements about finding aliens on Venus. But what is this all about? Did the Soviets really withhold scientific information on a grand scale? And did they really know of the existence of aliens on Venus? Stay tuned as we explore these explosive questions now. Neil deGrasse Tyson warns. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of the best-known astrophysicists in the United States and a major science communicator. Recently, he has pointed out the importance of the Soviet missions to Venus, and for a very specific reason. Many of the accomplishments that the Soviet Union achieved in space exploration were proudly shared with the public at the time. The contributions to Venus research are still considered revolutionary today, and arguably no other nation has contributed as much to our understanding of Venus as Russia. However, it is actually obvious that the former Soviet Union was far from sharing all the information with Western scientists during the Cold War. Some of the achievements may also have been less well known and may be of renewed interest today. Others may have been overlooked or deliberately suppressed. Tyson cautioned in careful terms not to forget anything about the Soviets' Venus research when it comes to planning new missions to our neighboring planet. Shockingly, a new study from Russia proves just that. Allegedly, video footage from the Venera 13 probe even shows aliens. NASA wants to return to Venus. After a recent discovery of possible life on the planet, NASA has renewed a focus on exploring Venus. Before that, it had long been quiet about our inhospitable neighboring planet. After the biomarker phosphine was detected in Venus's atmosphere, NASA set up a new research program. Similar to Mars, computer simulations showed that Venus may have had a period in its evolution when it had a mild climate, possibly water, and even simple forms of life. Just as with Mars, changes then occurred that swept away this life and made Venus one of the most uncomfortable places in the solar system. Our home planet may also be facing changes that will make life increasingly difficult. Learning more about the processes that have caused desolation on Mars and Venus could tell us much more about our own fate, and we may even be able to avert it. Da Vinci Plus, the Deep Atmosphere Venus Investigation of Noble Gases Chemistry and Imaging Plus mission, is designed to penetrate Venus's atmosphere, which is 90 times denser than that of Earth. The samples and data collected will help scientists determine how Venus has evolved, whether it has ever had oceans, and whether traces of microbes can be found in the atmosphere. Da Vinci Plus is accompanied by Veritas, or more specifically, the Venus Emissivity, Radioscience, INSAR, Topography, and Spectroscopy mission. The mission will produce a detailed map of the planet's surface and attempt to reconstruct the geologic history of Venus. Each of NASA's 2 new Venus missions has been given a budget of $500 million. These missions will study the planet's atmosphere and geological features. The decision to again send missions to Venus marks a significant change in strategy for NASA, which has focused primarily on Mars in recent decades. According to NASA Solar System Exploration, more than 40 spacecraft have visited Venus to date. NASA's last mission to Venus was the Magellan mission, which was launched in 1990 and spent 4 years collecting data, resulting in the first mapping of the planet's surface. At the present moment, only one spacecraft is in orbit around the planet. Akatsuki from Japan is an orbiter that has been taking measurements around Venus since 2010. So far, this orbiter has not found any traces of life. However, the probe has also launched with some mishaps and has never reached the position originally intended for the mission. It also launched before the phosphine findings became known. Venus in the 1960s. In the 1960s, Venus was an enigmatic and challenging planet in NASA's eyes. Their records referred to it as a hell planet. Conditions on this planet are truly extreme and hostile to life. With temperatures high enough to melt lead and a dense, toxic atmosphere, Venus has always been a difficult target for space exploration. While NASA viewed Venus as challenging and mysterious, Venus became the Soviet Union's favored target. NASA, on the other hand, focused first on the Moon and then on Mars. The Red Planet, with its Earth-like topography and evidence of flowing water in the past, was considered the most likely place for extraterrestrial life in the solar system. By the 1960s, the space exploration race was in full swing, and both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were determined to be the first to reach and explore alien planets. For the US, the decision to set Mars as the primary target was not only scientifically motivated, it was also a symbol of the Cold War, in which the US and the Soviet Union were in a race for technological superiority and geopolitical dominance. As the red planet, Mars was somehow also a sign of communist systems and for socialism. If NASA were the first to land a probe there, it would have symbolically captured the planet of the Eastern Bloc. While the US targeted Mars, the Soviet Union chose to focus its resources on Venus, creating an interesting contrast in the two nations' space goals. The Soviets accepted the challenge. Initially then, the Soviet Union was not at all entirely voluntarily determined to send missions to Venus. Nevertheless, the nation's engineers and scientists accepted the challenge, and they were to meet it so brilliantly that to this day, the US can only tip its hat to the ingenuity, the technological advances, and ultimately the successes. Venus offered the Soviet Union the opportunity to demonstrate technological superiority, and it did just that. It was not until much later that wild speculation arose about the true Soviet intentions. Allegedly, the Soviet Union was obsessed with Venus and intended to use its surface as a military base or to colonize the planet. Officially, the Soviet Union only sent some of the most successful probes ever to Venus. Of the nearly 30 missions, many went wrong. Probes landed in the wrong places, cameras didn't work, and other mishaps occurred. But the Soviet Union was tough, didn't let itself be put off by any failure, and continued on its course. Almost annually, probes were launched to Venus, sometimes even 2 per year, and with each launch, the probes became more successful. The Venera missions lasted from 1961 to 1983. The Soviets launched a total of 28 spacecraft to explore the planet, with 13 entering Venus's atmosphere and 8 landing successfully. Launching on February 12, 1961, Venera 1 was the first mission to attempt to fly past Venus. Unfortunately, the probe's telemetry failed 7 days after launch. It's believed that it approached Venus to within 100,000 kilometers and then simply flew past. Venera 3 became famous in 1966 as the first man-made object to impact another planet. Although it landed on Venus on March 1, 1966, no data could be sampled from Venus's atmosphere due to a failure of the measuring instruments. On October 18, 1967, Venera 4 made up for it and became the first spacecraft to measure the atmosphere of another planet. It revealed that the main gas in Venus's atmosphere is CO2. Venera 5 and 6 were specifically designed as atmospheric probes. In 1969, they each collected 53 and 51 minutes of data, respectively, while slowly descending through the atmosphere with a parachute. Venera 9 had June 8, 1975 to thank for the first images of the surface of another planet. The first sound recordings on another planet were provided by Venera 13 in 1981. And not only that, among the mission's accomplishments to this day are the best and most beautiful images of the surface of Venus. Around the Venera 13 mission, speculations arose again in the last years. Dr. Leonid Sanfilmality, a renowned researcher of the Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences, has identified several objects resembling living beings on never-published images of this mission. His research and discoveries regarding Venus and the Venera missions have once again caused quite a stir in the scientific community. The researcher described 3 main objects that could not be explained. One was a disc-shaped entity that seemed to respond to changes in temperature or pressure. The second object resembled a black lobe that was visible for the first 13 minutes of the mission. Closer inspection revealed it to be a vertically elongated black object with an unknown appearance. Surprisingly, the black object disappeared from the images taken in the 27th and 36th minutes of Venera 13's landing approach. The most intriguing discovery was an alien scorpion sighted in the 90th minute of the mission. The origin of the scorpion is unknown, possibly extraterrestrial or astrobiological in nature. Secrets of the Soviet Union. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 affected far more than just the country itself. This change led to a profound geopolitical transformation, but it also left a legacy of mystery and speculation. The Soviet Union was known for its secrecy and advanced intelligence operations. This very culture of secrecy also has led to numerous theories and speculations surrounding secret findings of space travel. It has been repeatedly claimed that the Soviet Union may have possessed information about contacts with extraterrestrials, and the new studies on the forgotten data from the Venera 13 mission seem to support such thoughts. There were also always rumors that there was a secret airbase in the Soviet Union where extraterrestrials landed, similar to Area 51 in the USA, but there is still no concrete evidence for this. Dark matter is one of the most mysterious phenomena in the universe. Scientists assume that it's one of the fundamental building blocks of the universe, but it's neither visible nor measurable. Now it turns out that dark matter is not just a filler of the universe and is involved in the formation of black holes. Dark matter may have formed fascinating stars in the early days of the universe that shone brighter than any stars known today. Come with us on this journey to the threshold of the universe and to what may be an entirely new kind of star. What was in the beginning? The James Webb Space Telescope is designed to illuminate the mysterious early era of the universe. At the very beginning of the telescope's operational life, we were in for a surprise. An image taken deep into space revealed very old galaxies that were far brighter and more regular than they should have been at that early date. Since then, scientists have puzzled over the true nature of this phenomenon. In order to know how stars and the first celestial bodies such as planets or even gas clouds and rocks in the cosmos really evolved, we would have to find the oldest representatives. With the James Webb Telescope, this is theoretically possible, but only if the cosmos is really 13.8 billion years old as assumed so far. If the universe is possibly much older, also James Webb would have to pass, because the mirrors of the super telescope can catch only light, which was on the way to us about 13.5 billion years. During this first epoch of the universe, there should not have been much older light than that, according to the previous opinions of scientists. Only when the first stars from fast-rotating gas and dust disks developed, it became light. Researchers would like to find only too gladly some of these very old and first stars. A completely new type of star? Right now, it looks like researchers may have found a type of star they never thought possible. Einstein was able to predict the existence of black holes because the probability of the existence of such objects was apparent in his equations for relativity in the cosmos. It was not until about 40 years later that these mysterious objects were actually discovered in space. Currently, researchers believe a type of star is possible that no human has ever calculated or predicted. A star powered by dark matter that shines as brightly as an entire galaxy. So, of course, we can wonder how scientists are now coming up with this idea. In fact, the mysterious existence of the giant galaxies during the cosmic dawn could also be explained by the fact that these light spots are not galaxies at all, but single, extremely brightly shining superstars. The oldest light of the universe? In April 2023, an article appeared in Nature Astronomy, which describes 4 highly interesting objects in more detail. More precisely, they are galaxy candidates named JADES-GS-C10-0 to JADES-GS-Z13-0. They are galaxy candidates because researchers assume they are galaxies, but they can't be completely sure at that distance. At first sight, these galaxies don't look very impressive. But here, you can see some of the oldest objects ever seen in the universe. The Z value at the end of the name indicates how far away the galaxy is from us. Z10 is closer than Z12, and Z13 is the most distant and therefore probably the oldest light source. They were discovered as part of the JWST Advanced Deep Extragalactic Survey, or JADES for short. JADES has set itself to the task of studying the very first galaxies that formed in our universe. This is now possible for the very first time in human history because the JWST works with a completely new infrared technique, which makes it possible for the first time to study old and distant objects in detail. To determine age and distance, researchers measure the value of the red light shift. As light travels through expanding space, it expands. The spectrum shifts into the red region. The detailed analyses of red light that are now possible thanks to James Webb allow scientists to make more accurate statements than ever before. Dark stars on the cusp of time? If we look at these objects, We are looking at the cosmos as it looked about 400 million years after the Big Bang. Based on the brightness of these spots, it appears that these objects must be entire galaxies. However, measurements of the light frequencies have shown partly contradictory results. The values of mass and luminosity did not fit well into the picture. Just as improbable, it was according to previous theories that in this epoch of the universe, finished galaxies already existed. The problem of the almost impossible early galaxies had caused a lot of stir in the summer of 2022, and some scientists are convinced that these objects have what it takes to disprove the Big Bang theory. Other scientists take a more cautious view of the discovery. They believe that it's not possible to say for sure at a distance whether these are really galaxies. They could also be luminous accretion disks formed around supermassive black holes, or the images show an unknown form of early star. Furthermore, critics of galaxy theory argue that these images show objects from a time when the cosmos may have functioned very differently than it does today. We do not know which processes exactly led to the fact that from the dark cosmos a shining one began. This is where the exciting new theory of dark stars comes in. A star is normally born from a cloud of dust and gas when gravity overcomes the pressure exerted by the matter in that cloud. In an ordinary star like our Sun, the necessary pressure is caused by the nuclear fuel that balances gravity and inflates the star. But a dark star would be so massive that even the nuclear fire would not be enough to balance the gravity. Instead, the dark star is driven by something much more exotic: dark matter. Now, this theory has a small catch because researchers still don't know exactly what dark matter actually is. To explain the dark giant star theory, researchers introduced a theoretical particle, the WIMP. WIMPs could be a kind of heavy and only weakly interacting particle which collide in the center of an extremely massive star, there to compress each other so strongly that a huge amount of energy is released. Purely mathematically, this process would explain why a dark star is not compressed by its gravity. Nevertheless, a dark star would probably be very unstable and could only exist for a short time before exploding or collapsing. Further calculations have shown that such a dark matter star would not be truly dark. Rather, it could shine as brightly as an entire galaxy during its short lifespan. So, are we seeing such mysterious dark stars here, representing an entirely new category of stars? Or are they just darn old galaxies after all, calling the Big Bang theory into question? Scientists are currently struggling to come to terms with the JWST discoveries, and the uncertainties are driving the scientific community to ever new speculations and theories. What is really true, only the future and possibly an even better telescope than James Webb will show. Sense and nonsense of the research. In view of the new discoveries and the controversy that has now broken out in the academic world, the question arises once again, why it's actually so important to find out what happened in the early hours of the cosmos. Some people consider this research, and especially the sums invested in it, to be as excessive as the quarrels and disagreements of natural science. But if we look more closely, there is much more behind this research than being right or a contest among scientific disciplines. Physics seeks to understand the fundamental laws that govern our reality. Some of these laws are known to us, but we probably don't know all of them, because scientists still can't describe the entire universe and its formation 100% scientifically. The universe as we know it today is probably the result of billions of years of cosmological evolution. By studying its beginnings, we can understand the first moments after the Big Bang, which in turn helps us understand the forces and mechanisms that have shaped our current cosmological situation. Through this knowledge, we may one day begin to dominate matter. That this is not so improbable is shown by the studies of the Russian cosmologist Nikolai Kardashev. He had created a scale according to which intelligent species can develop so far that they dominate the universe. Super civilizations can create, form, and change matter. Natural science is a basic condition to arrive at realizations like these. In the vastness of the cosmos can be found answers to the urgent questions of the energy problem and space travel. This could be the case for medicine as well, and each and every one of us could benefit enormously if scientists unravel the mystery of matter. The discovery of new sources of energy or forces of nature could change everything in this world, just as scientific discoveries of the past have led people out of the Dark Ages. So, there is much more behind research than curiosity and scientific vanity. If we want to evolve, we need to know more about the universe and its true nature. In addition, this research also has an important philosophical and spiritual meaning. The question about the origin of the universe is closely connected with the question about our own origin and the meaning of our existence in this world. Even if at the moment quite chaos has broken out in cosmology, the scientists will overcome this uncertain time. Further findings will create new knowledge, and one day, we may have settled the question around the meaning of the universe. James Webb will accompany us for the next 20 years, and the sensations in which we were allowed to participate so far are only the beginning. So, we can already be curious here and now. Which new fascinating discoveries James Webb will deliver and which theories will prove true in the end. Jupiter, the giant of the solar system, has been known to man since ancient times. As a brightly shining point, it traces its orbits across the night sky. For a long time, researchers thought they had found out everything about this planet. But then Jupiter surprises again and again with even more violent storms, an ocean of metals, and a hostile behavior that could be our undoing. Come along on this journey to the largest and most dangerous planet in the solar system. Jupiter, mystery of gas and dust. Even in ancient times, Jupiter was a figure of contention. As Lord of Olympus, he was the father of the gods in Roman mythology. Sometimes benevolent and wise, sometimes devious and angry, the chief of all gods stepped into the ring. It almost seems as if the astronomers of antiquity had a secret idea about the true nature of this celestial body. In ancient times, astronomers knew nothing about planets. They saw in Jupiter and the other planets visible to the naked eye an unusual star. Only in the present day does the planet's uncanny resemblance to the capricious father of the gods reveal itself. Jupiter has long been considered a benefactor, a cozy large planet whose gravity binds the solar system's numerous asteroids and comets in a stable belt between it and Mars. Thanks to the main asteroid belt, we are reasonably safe from the projectiles from space. At least that's what researchers thought for a long time. That this was a mistake, we will show you shortly. Jupiter is by far the largest planet in the solar system. If we were to put all the other planets on the scale together, Jupiter would still be quite a bit heavier. Some researchers are convinced that Jupiter almost became a star. Only a little more was missing. Then Jupiter would have initiated fusion processes by its gravity, as they take place on our Sun. Instead of a giant planet in the neighborhood, we would then have a second star. As the oldest planet in the solar system, it formed from the amount of gas and dust that did not become part of the Sun. Today, the star giant is composed mainly of gases such as hydrogen, helium, and dust. An ocean of metal. Hydrogen makes up about 90% of the planet's composition. In the outer layers of this gas giant, hydrogen is a colorless and transparent gas, just like on Earth. In the deeper layers, the atmospheric pressure increases immensely, and the hydrogen condenses to a bizarre liquid, which resembles liquid metal. This ocean of metallic hydrogen makes up about 10% of the inner areas of the planet. Liquid metallic hydrogen has properties similar to water, excellent electrical conductivity, and heat conduction. This bizarre substance turns Jupiter into a giant generator. On Earth, hydrogen can be artificially compressed in the laboratory to such an extent that it becomes a solid. However, hydrogen does not become metallic with us as a result and conducts heat and electricity poorly. Deep in Jupiter's layers, hydrogen is exposed to such extreme temperatures and pressures that it becomes liquid and metallic. This fact fascinates planetary scientists, and they would love to know firsthand what is going on inside the planet. The data that are available come from scans by the Juno space probe. It can penetrate deep into Jupiter's layers with its measuring instruments and measure detailed information about gases, elements, and temperatures. Scientists will probably never visit the ocean of liquid metallic hydrogen directly. Even if we eventually mastered space travel, we would have to stay away from the planets like Jupiter. The extreme gravity would magically attract a spacecraft at a certain threshold and then tear it apart inside the planet. Because of the large amounts of liquid metal at a depth of about 40,000 kilometers and its rapid rotation, Jupiter generates a colossal magnetic field that extends over an astonishing distance of 725 million kilometers. This magnetic field is the largest in our solar system and holds secrets of its own. Jupiter's magnetic field is 20,000 times stronger than Earth's and extends all the way to Jupiter's neighbor Saturn. The massive magnetic field is responsible for spectacular auroras at the poles of the gas giant and creates a mystery known as the Great Blue Spot. The fairly recently discovered magnetic anomaly near the gas giant's equator is not a storm, like the much better known and larger red spot, but a region with a particularly intense magnetic field. Unlike Earth's dipolar magnetic field, which consists of a north and south pole, Jupiter's magnetic field has a much more complex structure. The Great Blue Spot could be considered a kind of second magnetic south pole near the equator. The intensity of the magnetic field in this region varies by up to 1% annually, strengthening and weakening in different areas. Although the nature of the Great Blue Spot is completely different from that of the Great Red Spot, the two phenomena may have a complex connection in the overall structure of the planet because they lie at similar latitudes. At the moment, the Great Blue Spot is still the subject of current scientific investigation. The Great Cold Spot. The gas giant Jupiter also has other spots. Scientists refer to a spot that extends about 12,000 by 24,000 kilometers as the Great Cold Spot. The cold spot is not a storm, nor is it directly related to the magnetic field. This fascinating atmospheric feature is a region of much colder temperatures compared to its surroundings. Colder in this case means a difference of about 200 degrees Celsius. In the upper layers, Jupiter's temperature is about negative 145 degrees Celsius. Deeper, the pressure increases so massively that temperatures also probably rise to 20,000 degrees Celsius or even higher. The Great Cold Spot on Jupiter is located in the planet's thermosphere, where temperatures are usually around 800 degrees Celsius. Around the spot, temperatures plummet to about 600 degrees. The Great Cold Spot is unstable and appears only intermittently. Since it's always accompanied by the appearance of auroras, there is probably a connection. Jupiter's auroras are formed similarly to ours on Earth when charged particles from the solar winds interact with the magnetic field and atmosphere of the planet pole. On Jupiter, the auroras are more stable and intense because they are enhanced by particles originating from the planet's moons. New evidence shows that the intense auroras transfer energy to Jupiter's atmosphere and create a temperature difference between the upper and lower regions. This temperature difference leads to the formation of the swirling vortex known as the cold spot. Water on Jupiter. Water vapor was first detected on Jupiter in 1995 by the Galileo spacecraft. The near-infrared mapping spectrometer aboard Galileo recorded the fine water vapor in the planet's atmosphere during their close flyby. Recent data show that water makes up about 0.25% of Jupiter's atmosphere directly above the equator. While that may not seem like much, it's an immense amount of water when measured against the planet's massive size. In recent years, a team of researchers used telescope data to discover an even greater amounts of water in Jupiter's famous Great Red Spot. The Juno spacecraft, launched in 2012, confirmed the water findings in the gas giant's clouds. The water creates flashes that are hundreds of times brighter than terrestrial ones. The process is much like ours on Earth. When water droplets and ice crystals collide in clouds, they create electrical charges. When these charges become strong enough, lightning is produced. In the past, researchers discovered lightning in Jupiter's atmosphere, where water droplets collide with electrically charged ice particles. Juno then recorded more water discoveries in the higher atmospheric layers. There, where temperatures drop to about negative 87 degrees Celsius, it's actually much too cold for liquid water. Nevertheless, it flashes faintly there too. The answer to the puzzle lies in a small amount of ammonia in Jupiter's atmosphere, which serves as a natural antifreeze. In the upper atmosphere, water ice crystals combine with ammonia vapors and melt. These water ammonia droplets then collide with more ice crystals from below, creating an electrical charge that discharges in lightning bolts. Under the ammonia ice clouds, the ammonia water droplets even grow so continuously that they become large hailstones. Jupiter and the asteroids. Reconstructions of the evolution of our solar system have shown that Jupiter's influence has been instrumental in stabilizing the orbits of many planets. Its gravity has bound numerous asteroids and comets, so that impacts in the inner solar system have decreased enormously over millions of years. In the past, astronomers have even suggested that this was one of the reasons life had a chance on Earth. But recent findings cast doubt on Jupiter's role as a terrestrial protector. Long-period comets, which originate in the distant regions of the solar system and take millennia to orbit the Sun, would also pass by us if Jupiter's gravitational influence did not hurl them out of the solar system even before they approach Earth. The chances of long-period comets colliding with our planet are therefore extremely rare, occurring over millions or even tens of millions of years. Jupiter's presence thus plays a crucial role in protecting Earth from these potential impacts. However, the gas giant's gravitational forces have both positive and negative effects. On the one hand, its immense gravity prevents nearby space rocks from accumulating and forming into a planet. Instead, thousands of asteroids, smaller rocks, and comets fly secured in a broad band between Mars and Jupiter. Not so long ago, however, astronomers discovered that at certain times, the gas giant's gravitational pull can also change so that it virtually pushes asteroids out of the belt and hurls them in our direction. Almost in such a way as Jupiter, the god of thunder and lightning, brought his bad mood or vengefulness over the people, then also the planet Jupiter behaves. The asteroids set in motion in this way do not necessarily have to collide with the Earth, but collisions with the Earth increase in probability. In 1770, Comet Lexell passed Earth by only about 1.5 million kilometers. On the astronomical scale, that's actually a short distance. Scientists believe that the comet originally came from the outermost reaches of the solar system and came close to the gas giant during its flight. It was deflected by its gravity and hurled directly towards Earth. After completing 2 orbits around the Sun, the comet returned to Jupiter's vicinity 9 years later, and this time was ejected from it out of the solar system. Jupiter's gravity could cause more problems in the future. It's probably its influence that is causing the smallest planet, Mercury, to move into an increasingly oblique orbit, and at some point, it will probably be pushed into the Sun by the tremendous force of the gas giant. So, Jupiter is both a curse and a blessing, or just the way it is. Planets certainly have no evil intentions in what they do. Do you find Jupiter threatening now, or is it simply a fascinating celestial body for you? On September 15, 2012, the ashes of the most famous astronaut of all time were released to the sea from the deck of the cruiser USS Philippine Sea. Burial in the Atlantic Ocean was a heartfelt wish of Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. Millions of U.S. citizens commemorated an incomparable national hero that day. After Armstrong's death, some rumors were confirmed that shock and touch us. What did we not know all these years about Armstrong's moon mission? And what did the astronauts involved at that time have to keep to themselves for life? Stay tuned as we investigate the shocking facts of the moon landing and uncover how one of America's most famous men really lived. Armstrong's family reveals. Nearly 11 years after the death of the man who became the very first person to set foot on a celestial body outside of Earth, his family is going public with another shocking revelation. The stories include details about the astronaut's dramatic end to life, which has been anything but heroic. Armstrong underwent heart surgery in the summer of 2012 that should have been routine. Nevertheless, the national hero died as a result of the procedure. The problem wasn't surgical error or an unexpected complication. A harrowing report reveals that a lack of care after the procedure led to a rapid deterioration in Neil Armstrong's condition. A nation is shocked after the connections came to light. Is this how a country like the USA and its healthcare system treats its heroes? Incidents occurred at Mercy Health Hospital in Cincinnati. After the dramatic circumstances of her husband's death became known, Armstrong's widow, Carol, tried to limit the damage. Armstrong's family had very well taken action against the hospital after the incident, and they had quietly agreed to pay about $6 million. The government is also said to have advised Armstrong's widow to accept the money and to keep quiet about the true circumstances of her husband's death. The explosive information came to the public through a secret informant. even 11 years after the death of the man, who was quoted as saying, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," became world famous. What was really in the box? Immediately after the passing of the beloved astronaut, another fact became known that captivated and touched the nation. Armstrong's widow, Carol, had told in an interview that she had found something unexpected in her husband's personal belongings after his death. It was a small box containing some odd and very old-looking items. Carol Armstrong soon recognized technical parts, as well as a camera from the 1960s. She figured these items were somehow related to the moon mission and turned the find over to NASA. Apparently Armstrong, who had retired from the public eye in a very modest way after the lunar landings and never flew into space again, had probably secured some mementos of the Apollo 11 mission. The pieces are likely worth at least 6 figures today. Carol Armstrong said that she had not known about the box for all those years. Her husband had never spoken about these keepsakes. Nevertheless, they seemed to have been very important to him, because he had kept them until the end of his life in a place where Armstrong kept his most personal things. NASA again used the find to celebrate Armstrong as a quiet hero who, despite his retirement from the limelight and from lunar missions, had a lifetime of pride in his achievement as the first man on the moon. NASA leaks the concealed details of the moon landing. Since its inception in the 1950s, NASA has been an organization that accomplishes great things, but also divides. Much like the US government and other agencies of the state, NASA has been repeatedly suspected of lying to and manipulating people on a grand scale. In the late 1980s, rumors surfaced that the entire moon landing was just a fake. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins had allegedly never flown to the moon, and the whole landing was staged in a Hollywood movie studio, just to get one over on the Russians, who were ahead in space travel at the time. These suspicions could not be proven until today, although there were allegedly dozens of witnesses who claimed to have been involved in the staging. A plausible explanation for these scenarios many years later was that NASA had a plan B in case the real moon landing should fail in a dramatic way. Had that been the case, NASA might have considered staging a fake to save face for the nation in the Cold War. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were completely believable when they recounted their experiences on the moon. Like photographs, the film footage was examined several times by experts and found to be genuine. Likewise, the mystery of the waving flag on the moon could be solved. There is really no wind on the moon, but the frame on which the flag was stuck into the ground was moving, and this also caused the flag to vibrate in a way that resembled a breeze. Armstrong always called rumors like this nonsense, and the find of his small devotional box should be probably also a good proof that the man was really on the moon. Unless also this find was a later fake of NASA? What do you think? Let us know in the comments after you watch the video. More rumors about the moon landing. One circumstance of the moon landing that was concealed in 1969 and only became public much later was the almost botched landing on the moon. While third astronaut Michael Collins remained aboard the spacecraft, Armstrong and Aldrin descended 2 at a time in the Eagle landing capsule. Buzz Aldrin piloted the capsule and had to cope with some failures of important instruments and landing devices during the approach to the moon. To top it off, the radio link to Earth failed, and Armstrong and Aldrin seemed lost for a few minutes from the point of view of ground control in Houston. President Nixon had had a morning speech recorded, especially for this purpose, before the land of the Saturn V rocket. If something were to go wrong in front of millions of television viewers worldwide, the speech would have been ready immediately. But Armstrong and Aldrin had no intention of dying on the moon. Buzz Aldrin was, and still is to this day, an extremely experienced pilot and manually landed the Eagle on the moon. The incident landed the 2 astronauts several kilometers away from the actual planned landing site. The terrain in this area was rocky and characterized by cliffs with sharp edges. When contact was re-established with ground control, Armstrong and Aldrin were warned not to get too close to the rocks so as not to jeopardize the safety of their spacesuits. Moon rocks are extremely sharp. The television broadcast resumed when the astronauts were ready to leave Eagle, and again, one fact was long concealed. Actually, Armstrong and Aldrin should have taken a nap first, but the two were too excited to rest and began their lunar walk without resting. Even before Armstrong set his foot in the soft lunar dust, he addressed his famous radio message to mankind. Shortly thereafter, another important part is said to have been removed from the transmission of the moon landing. Allegedly, Armstrong and Aldrin sighted some spaceships at the edge of the crater. The radio message stating, "They're here. They're parked on the edge of the crater. They're watching us," is now almost as famous in some circles as that of a man's first small step on the moon. The secret radio message was leaked by a whistleblower. Although Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong never literally said after the landing that they had seen extraterrestrials, Aldrin in particular is said to have confirmed the existence and sighting of UFOs on the moon throughout his life in private and by discreet hints. The forgotten third astronaut. Around the rumors of extraterrestrials on the moon, one man repeatedly comes into the sights of UFO lodges and science fiction enthusiasts. Michael Collins was the third astronaut of Apollo 11, who was gladly forgotten after the fame of Armstrong and Aldrin. Collins piloted the Apollo 11 command module and remained in lunar orbit while Armstrong and Aldrin were on the surface. It was during this time that Collins became a late spaceflight legend. At the time, hardly anyone was interested in the dark side of the moon, the part of the moon that we humans on Earth normally never get to see because the moon always faces the same side towards Earth due to a bound orbit. Today, wild rumors swirl about the far side of the moon, about alien bases, stranded spaceships, and other facilities posted on the moon by extraterrestrials. Collins was the first person to ever see the far side of the moon with his own eyes. Of course, he was questioned several times about what he saw there. Collins described the landscape as rugged and beautiful, his solitary trip around the moon as a profound, moving experience. Never before had a man been so far in space and all alone. More than 400,000 kilometers, Collins was away from Earth, his family, and everything familiar. If something had happened to Aldrin and Armstrong on the moon, Collins would have been all alone. He would have had no means of coming to the aid of his comrades, since the command module was not designed to land on the moon. But all went well and the three heroes returned to Earth unharmed. For a few months, there was a lot of hype about the three. Then the next Apollo mission started and Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins retired from NASA. Evidence of aliens on the far side of the moon. Rumors surrounding alien ships on the far side emerged with the late Apollo missions. To this day, purported images circulate through the web showing a stranded spacecraft on the moon several hundred meters long. According to some unconfirmed rumors, Apollo astronauts are said to have recovered 2 female bodies from the spacecraft in a secret mission. Although the ship could have been there for millions of years, the 2 bodies are said to be remarkably well preserved, which could be due to the unusual climatic conditions of the moon. Lunar fans have since discovered several features on the far side of the moon that suggest entrances to underground facilities. Because the activity of extraterrestrial forces on the moon is said to have increased again in the early 1980s, the Apollo 18 and 19 missions were officially canceled. However, there is no evidence for this. Neptune is about 30 times farther from the Sun than our Earth. As the last of the major planets, it orbits the Sun almost in complete darkness. Due to the lack of light, Neptune can only be seen from Earth with very good telescopes. The latest telescope now provided brand new views of this normally luminous blue planet. In this photo from the James Webb Telescope, Neptune shines almost as brightly as a star. But where did the glow suddenly come from, and what makes this planet so unique? Let's take a look at the latest discoveries and findings about the enigmatic ice giant, Neptune. You have never seen Neptune like this before. The James Webb Space Telescope outdid itself again in September 2022 by capturing a stunning image of Neptune and its rings. This image provides the clearest view of the rings of the distant planet that we have ever had. Indeed, the fine dust rings are not visible to the naked eye. They shimmered ever so slightly in an image taken by NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft in 1989. But the quality of the image was barely enough to draw more accurate conclusions about the ring's composition and origin. The Webb telescope image clearly witnesses even the fainter dust rings of Neptune. This image was made possible by the near-infrared camera, or NIRCam for short, which can image objects in the near-infrared range from 0.6 to 5 microns. Due to light filtering, Neptune does not appear blue to the Webb telescope, but shines brilliantly. The image continues to show 7 of Neptune's 14 known moons. Triton, Neptune's large and unusual moon, dominates this image as a very bright point of light. Triton reflects an average of 70% of the sunlight that hits it, far outshining Neptune. This image is fascinating not only because of its unusual angle of view and its impressive composition. Scientists have gained completely new insights into the dynamics and composition of the planet and its moons. Almost at the edge of our solar system. Up to Neptune, the official major planets of the system are Mercury, Venus, the Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and finally Uranus and Neptune. Until 2006, we had another planet, Pluto, but since the discovery of more Pluto-like objects in the fringes of the solar system, these mini-planets have been demoted to so-called trans-Neptunian objects. The size jump from Neptune to Pluto is indeed huge. Pluto is not even half the size of its neighbor. Because of its remoteness, Neptune is the least studied planet in the entire solar system. For a long time, researchers also thought that Neptune was not particularly exciting because hardly any life was suspected in this darkness, and the ice planet was considered barren and desolate. But this was a mistake. According to the newest realizations, one of the coldest planets in the system could support an ocean of hot water, and in this, even life forms would be conceivable. Neptune is an ice giant, about 4 times the size of Earth. It has a radius of about 15,300 miles and a volume of 15 trillion cubic miles, giving it a bottom-line volume 58 times larger than Earth. Neptune's main constituents are water, methane, and ammonia. Like the other ice and gas giants in our system, Neptune has no solid surface. Its atmosphere extends deep into the planet to the mantle, which consists of methane and ammonia ice and a rocky core. Yet scientists believe the ice giant may have an internal warm to even hot ocean. More alive than thought. Neptune's secret is that it is by no means as dull as researchers long thought. Scientists became aware of Neptune when they discovered that it has an active climate and some of the most violent and powerful storms in the solar system. The climatic phenomena on Neptune are much more like an oversized rocky planet than a gas planet. Measurements have revealed that Neptune's solid core may be larger and more complex than long thought. In fact, intense geological processes inside the planet can explain the weather phenomena, but not only that, model calculations have shown that Neptune could harbor a warm ocean beneath its ice. Sunlight travels a full 4 hours to reach Neptune's surface. Neptune's average atmospheric temperature is minus 182 degrees Celsius, making it one of the coldest objects in the solar system. Between the years 2003 to 2018, the planet experienced significant cooling, and at the same time, temperatures at the South Pole rose in 2018. Researchers noticed an interesting change in the chemical composition of Neptune's atmosphere in this context. These very changes provided evidence of internal heating produced by gravitational compression, or gravitational interaction between Neptune and its moon Triton. This naturally raises the question of whether life could exist on Neptune. For a long time, researchers thought that this was not possible, but this view is slowly changing. Since we have found life in the most impossible places on Earth, we have to open our minds to the possibility that life may exist in places in the solar system that we have previously overlooked. For a long time, we searched on Mars, and even Venus will soon be examined more closely for traces of microbes in the atmosphere. But Neptune was not on anyone's radar during this search. Some very brave scientists even suggested that some of the strange spots on Neptune might be caused by swarms of bacteria under the thick ice. This theory currently finds few supporters, but who knows? We may be in for a surprise. Neptune's troubled past. Another explanation for the enormous internal energy inside Neptune could have been a collision with a cosmic object. Since Neptune is the only planet that radiates nearly 3 times as much energy as it receives from the Sun, some as-yet unknown mechanism must be at work. Another clue is the unusual 28-degree tilt of the axis. The axis tilt is similar to Earth's and explains why Neptune experiences seasons. Unlike on Earth, a season on Neptune lasts not just a few months, but a full 40 years. Because of Neptune's long distance from the Sun, the clocks run a little differently here. Not only are the seasons a bit longer than on Earth, but also a Neptune year is a bit longer, at 165 Earth years. However, since Neptune rotates quite quickly around its own axis, a day on the planet lasts just 16 hours. The planet's rapid rotation generates some of the strongest winds in the solar system. Neptune is the windiest planet in the system, and winds quickly assume speeds of up to 1,900 kilometers per hour. This makes Neptune's storms even stronger than those on Jupiter. Similar to Jupiter, Neptune also has a large storm that forms a prominent surface. The Earth-sized cyclone was first discovered by the Voyager 2 spacecraft in 1989. In 1994, the storm had disappeared from a new image taken by the Hubble telescope. Instead, a small, new spot had appeared in the northern hemisphere. In contrast to the 300-year-old cyclone on Jupiter, the violent storms on Neptune exist only 2 to 6 years. Since Neptune has certain similarities with Jupiter and has a kind of mixture of a rocky planet and a gas planet in its interior, researchers came up with an interesting idea. Neptune seems somehow out of place on its position at the outer edge of the solar system. From the evolutionary history of the planets, Neptune may have once formed between Mars and Jupiter. It's quite possible that some planets in our solar system have exchanged places in the course of time. Thus, Neptune could have been pushed to the edge of the system by the tremendous gravitational forces of Jupiter. Another crazy theory says that Neptune is so different from all other planets because it did not originally come from our solar system at all, but was captured as a vagabond planet by our sun at some point. If this theory is correct, Neptune would be an alien world which quasi-cheated itself into our solar system. Why is Neptune so blue? Neptune's atmosphere is 80% hydrogen and 19% helium, with the rest being other gases, including some methane. In fact, it is this small amount of methane that colors the planet deep blue. Methane molecules absorb solar radiation in the short-wave region and reflect the color blue. Uranus has a very similar distribution of gases, but unlike Neptune, its color is pale blue. Researchers from Oxford University tried to unravel this mystery. In their thesis, they suggested that this difference in color could be due to the density of the methane nebula. Both planets have several layers within their atmospheres formed from fine aerosols. The bottom layer is a mixture of hydrogen disulfide ice. The second layer is probably exactly what turns both planets more or less blue. Since Neptune's atmosphere is much more active than Uranus's, its second aerosol layer is thinner. Because of the lower density, more light is reflected, and this provides the intense blue color. The third atmospheric layer consists of large particles of methane ice. The retrograde moon, Triton. Thanks to James Webb's new image, scientists will unlock the secrets of Neptune's best-known moon, Triton. Triton is a very active moon. Its surface is covered in methane and nitrogen ice. Methane flakes appear, and Triton has very active volcanoes. Researchers have not been able to explain how the heat inside and the unusual volcanism came about. It was thought that the seventh largest moon in the solar system is heated by Neptune's gravity. The volcanoes emit a mixture of cold dust and gas into the thin atmosphere. It is possible that these ejections are involved in the formation of Neptune's fine rings of dust and gas. A very similar process has been observed in the vicinity of Saturn. There, the icy moon Enceladus feeds one of the gas giant's outer rings with tiny ice particles. Triton is special among the moons of the solar system because it orbits retrograde around its planet. This suggests that it may once have been an independent object captured by Neptune. The unusual retrograde orbit and its intense reflection have led to speculation that this moon was originally a Kuiper Belt object, gravitationally bound by Neptune. Researchers now hope the new image and much more information will finally clarify where Neptune really came from and when and how Triton became bound to it. It's really exciting what's happening at the very edge of the solar system. It almost seems like every planet and every moon in the solar system has some fascinating property that makes it unique and a worthwhile object of study. We look forward to sharing more information about Neptune and its moons with you soon. Tell us now what you find particularly interesting about this planet.